Please don't cry. It's Christmas.
He's smiling right there.
I know, sweetie, but I just can't help it.
She was rejected on a Christmas blind date, humiliated, heartbroken, left sitting alone in a crowded restaurant while families celebrated around her. She thought that was the end of her story. But then, a little girl with wild blonde curls walked up to her table and asked a question that would change 3 lives forever. "Can we join you?" Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Noelle Crawford's hands were trembling. She sat perfectly still at table 7 in Bellini's Italian restaurant, staring at the flickering candle in front of her, while the sounds of Christmas Eve celebration swirled around her. Laughter, clinking glasses, children squealing with excitement. Families together. And she was alone. The chair across from her was empty. Bradley, her blind date, the man her sister had sworn was perfect for her, had walked out 15 minutes ago, not because of an emergency, not because something came up. He'd left because he never wanted to be there in the first place. "I only came to get my mother off my back," he said, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "I'm kinda already seeing someone, it's complicated, but I'm not really available. Sorry you got all dressed up for nothing." Then he was gone. Noelle pressed her palms flat against the table, willing herself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of all these people. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, chosen her favorite emerald green dress, worn the pearl earrings her grandmother had given her before she passed. She'd turned down dinner with her family because her sister had been so insistent. "This could be the one, Noelle. Just give him a chance." She'd given him a chance, and he'd used her. The humiliation was crushing. It pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. This wasn't just about tonight. This was about every failed relationship, every man who'd looked right through her, every time she'd hoped and been disappointed. At 31 years old, she was starting to believe something was fundamentally wrong with her, that she was the common denominator in all her romantic failures. A waiter passed by, giving her a sympathetic glance. He'd watched Bradley leave. They all had. Noelle blinked rapidly, but the tears were building anyway, hot, insistent, unstoppable. She just needed 1 minute to compose herself. Then she'd slip out quietly, drive home, and spend Christmas Eve alone with a bottle of wine and the realization that maybe she was meant to be by herself. But before that minute could pass, she heard a small voice. "Excuse me, are you okay?" Noelle looked down. Standing beside her table was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with wild blonde curls that stuck out in every direction and bright hazel eyes full of concern. She wore a red velvet dress with white trim, and a small bow was sliding out of her hair. Noelle tried to compose her face, tried to force a smile. I'm fine, sweetie. Thank you for asking." The little girl tilted her head, studying Noelle with an intensity that felt almost adult. "But you look sad. My daddy says it's okay to be sad sometimes, but you shouldn't be sad all by yourself. That makes it worse." The simple wisdom of it cracked something open in Noelle's chest. A laugh escaped, watery and broken, but genuine. "That's very wise advice." "My daddy is very smart," the girl said with complete confidence. Then she turned and pointed across the restaurant. "That's him over there. He's not very good at braiding hair, but he makes really good pancakes on Saturdays. And he does funny voices when he reads stories." Noelle followed the girl's gesture and saw a man frozen in his seat 3 tables away, his face a mixture of mortification and concern. He was tall, probably mid-30s, with dark hair and kind eyes. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. He stood quickly and hurried over, reaching for the little girl's hand. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice genuine. She has no concept of boundaries." "I do too have boundaries, I just don't like them." Despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in her chest, despite the tears still threatening to fall, Noelle laughed, really laughed. "Please don't apologize. She's wonderful." The man's shoulders relaxed slightly, But before he could respond, the little girl turned her attention back to Noel. "Daddy," she tugged on his sleeve, "the lady is all alone on Christmas Eve. That's really sad. Can we eat dinner with her? Please, pretty please with sprinkles." The man's face flushed red. "Clemmy, sweetheart, we can't just invite ourselves to." "It's okay," Noelle said quickly, surprising herself. "Really, you don't have to feel obligated." But the little girl, Clemmy, wasn't giving up. She looked at her with such earnest hope that it was almost impossible to resist. "Please, I can tell you about my Christmas list. I asked for a purple bicycle and also a dog, but Daddy says maybe on the dog. Maybe means probably not, but I'm still hoping." Noelle looked at the man again, and something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, an understanding that only people who'd known real loneliness could share. He extended his hand. "I'm Garrett Finnegan, and this little negotiator is Clementine."
"But you can call me Clemmy," the girl added quickly. "Everyone does, except Grandma when I'm in trouble. Then she says Clementine Rose Finnegan in a really loud voice." "I'm Noel," she said, shaking Garrett's hand. His grip was warm, steady. "Noel Crawford." Garrett hesitated, and Noel could see him weighing the decision. Then he smiled, a genuine, kind smile that reached his eyes. "Would you like some company? No pressure at all, but I'm told the breadsticks here are the best in the whole wide world." Noel looked at them, this earnest man with kind eyes and his irrepressible daughter in her red velvet dress, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that very much." Clemmy insisted on sitting between them. She climbed into the chair Bradley had vacated 20 minutes ago and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why Rapunzel was obviously the best Disney princess. She has the longest hair and also a chameleon named Pascal who changes colors and doesn't judge people. Garrett caught Noelle's eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry," over Clemmy's head. Noelle shook her head, smiling. The truth was, Clemmy's enthusiasm was exactly what she needed, a distraction from the humiliation still sitting heavy in her stomach. The waiter appeared, looking relieved to see Noelle was no longer alone. "Can I start you folks off with some drinks?" "Hot chocolate," Clemmy announced, "with extra marshmallows, please, and can you make them into a snowman shape?" "I'll see what I can do," the waiter said, grinning. After they'd ordered, breadsticks for the table, as promised, along with pasta for Clemmy, chicken parmesan for Garrett, and lasagna for Noelle. An awkward silence settled over the table.
Garrett cleared his throat. "So, I know this is probably weird and you absolutely don't have to explain anything, but are you okay? That guy who left was a blind date," Noelle finished, deciding honesty was easier than pretending. "My sister set it up. He showed up 20 minutes late and informed me he was only here to appease his mother. Apparently he's kinda seeing someone, but came anyway just so he could tell his mom he tried." Garrett's jaw tightened. I don't even have words for how horrible that is." "It's Christmas Eve," Noelle said, and despite her best efforts, her voice cracked slightly. "I turned down dinner with my family for this. I actually thought—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Sorry, you don't need to hear all this." "That man is a jerkface," Clemmy declared, with such conviction that both adults burst out laughing. "Clemmy," Garrett said, trying to sound stern but failing, "we don't call people jerk faces." "But he is one, Daddy. He made Miss Noel sad on Christmas Eve. That's what jerk faces do." "You're not wrong, sweetheart, but we still can't say it." "Can I think it really loud?" "Yes, you can think it as loud as you want." Noelle wiped her eyes, surprised to find she was smiling. "Thank you, Clemmy, for defending my honor." Clemmy reached across the table and patted Noelle's hand with such solemnity it was almost comical. "You're welcome. My daddy says good people shouldn't be sad, and you seem like a really good people." The breadsticks arrived, and Clemmy immediately grabbed one, declaring it the best in the whole wide world, just as she had promised. Between bites, she peppered Noelle with questions. "What's your favorite color?" "Green, like this dress." "Do you like dogs?" "I love dogs." "Do you think Daddy should let me get a dog?"
Garrett interjected quickly. Clemmy, you can't recruit strangers to your cause. She's not a stranger anymore, Daddy. She's Miss Noel. That's different. Noelle found herself relaxing for the first time all evening. There was something disarming about Clemmy's unfiltered enthusiasm, something healing about Garrett's quiet kindness. When their entrees arrived, the conversation flowed more naturally. Garrett asked about her work, and Noelle explained she was a kindergarten teacher at Riverside Elementary. His face lit up. Really? Clemmy starts kindergarten in the fall. She's already practicing her letters. I can write my whole name, Clemmy announced proudly. Clementine. It's a very long name, but I'm very good at it. That's impressive, Noelle said genuinely. Most kids your age are still working on their first names. Daddy says I get my smartness from my mommy, Clemmy said matter-of-factly, then took another bite of pasta. I saw something flash across Garrett's face. Pain, quickly hidden. She didn't press, sensing there was a story there he wasn't ready to tell. Instead, she asked Clemmy about her favorite books, and the little girl launched into an elaborate summary of a story about a dragon who was afraid of fire. Garrett jumped in occasionally to correct timeline details, and Noelle found herself genuinely enjoying the chaos of their dynamic. When Clemmy excused herself to go to the bathroom with Garrett supervising from a distance, Noelle sat back in her chair and took a deep breath. An hour ago, she'd been on the verge of breaking down. Now she was laughing, actually laughing. How had this happened? Garrett returned with Clemmy, who had somehow convinced him to let her get dessert. Just a small one. It's Christmas Eve. We can break the rules a little. Rules are made to be broken, Clemmy said wisely. Grandma Helen says that all the time. Grandma Helen says that when she sneaks you extra cookies, not as a life philosophy. Noelle found herself telling them about her family, her older sister who meant well but was constantly trying to fix Noelle's love life, her parents who lived in Charlottesville and still treated her like she was 18. She told them about her students, about the little boy in her class who insisted on bringing his pet rock to show and tell every single week. Garrett shared that he was an architect, that he'd recently finished designing a new community center downtown. He talked about his mother, Helen, who'd moved from North Carolina to help with Clemmy. He was careful, Noelle noticed, not to mention Clemmy's mother directly, though the absence was loud. 2 hours passed, then 3. Clemmy eventually started to fade. I'm not tired, she insisted, even as her eyes closed. I'm just resting my eyelids. Garrett smiled softly. I think that's our cue. We should probably get this little one home before she falls asleep in her tiramisu. Noelle felt a pang of disappointment. She wasn't ready for the evening to end. Of course. Thank you for joining me, for saving my Christmas Eve. I think Clemmy deserves the credit. She's the brave one. They paid the bill. Garrett insisted on covering everything despite Noelle's protests, and made their way to the parking lot. Clemmy was fully awake again now that they were outside, running ahead to look at the Christmas lights strung along the restaurant's exterior. She's really special, Noelle said quietly, watching the little girl twirl under the lights. She is, Garrett agreed. There was so much love in his voice, so much pride, that Noelle felt her chest tighten. She saved me, honestly, after... He trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. After my wife passed away, 3 years ago. Clemmy was only 2. I don't know how I would have survived without her. I'm so sorry, Noelle said, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. The careful way he talked about Clemmy's mother, the flash of pain when Clemmy mentioned her. It was, Garrett said simply. It still is some days, but Clemmy makes it easier. She makes everything easier. He turned to look at Noelle, his expression earnest. I know this is probably weird, and please don't feel obligated, but would it be too forward if I asked for your number? Not in a weird way. I'd like to see you again, if you're open to it. Noelle felt something warm bloom in her chest. I'd like that too. They exchanged numbers, and Garrett walked her to her car. Clemmy insisted on giving Noelle a hug goodbye, wrapping her small arms around Noelle's waist with surprising strength. I'm really glad we found you, Clemmy whispered. You have a nice smile. You should smile more. Noelle's eyes stung with fresh tears, but these were different, better. I'm glad you found me too, Clemmy. Very glad. As Noelle drove home that night, she kept replaying the evening in her mind. Bradley's cruelty, her despair, and then Clemmy's small voice asking if she was okay. Garrett's kindness, 3 hours of genuine connection. She'd walked into Bellini's expecting nothing and left with, what? Hope? Possibility? She wasn't sure yet, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to find out. Garrett texted her the next morning, Christmas Day. Garrett, Merry Christmas, Noelle. Clemmy wanted me to tell you that Santa brought her the purple bicycle, but not the dog. She's accepting this with grace and dignity. She cried for 10 minutes. Noelle laughed out loud. Merry Christmas to you both. Please tell Clemmy I'm very sorry about the dog situation. Maybe next year? Garrett, you just gave her hope. You realize that, right? She's already planning her Christmas list for next year. Noelle, sorry, not sorry. Garrett, listen, I know it's Christmas and you're probably with family, but I was wondering, would you want to get coffee sometime this week? Just us. No 5-year-old chaperone, as much as I love her. Noelle, I'd love that. They met at a small cafe near the James River on December 27th. Garrett arrived 5 minutes early, looking nervous in a way that Noelle found endearing. He'd worn a navy blue sweater that brought out his eyes, and he held the door open for her with old-fashioned courtesy. They ordered coffee and found a table by the window where weak winter sunlight filtered through. And then they talked. They talked about everything. Garrett told her about college, about meeting Marissa at a party junior year, about how they'd built a life together in Richmond. He told her about the diagnosis, the rare autoimmune condition that attacked Marissa's organs one by one, and about the 8 months of fighting that followed.
She was so strong, he said, staring into his coffee. Even at the end, she was thinking about Clemmy, about making sure I knew how to braid her hair, what songs she liked before bed, how to handle the nightmares. She made me promise I'd keep living, that I wouldn't just shut down. Did you? Noelle asked gently. Keep living? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Not at first. The first year was just survival. Getting through each day. Making sure Clemmy was okay. My mom moved in, which helped, but I was so angry, Noelle, at everything. At the universe, at myself for not being able to fix it. That's understandable. Maybe. But it wasn't fair to Clemmy. She'd lost her mother, and she needed her father, and I was just hollow. He looked up, meeting Noelle's eyes, but she kept pulling me back. She'd ask me to read stories, to play tea party, to watch cartoons. And eventually I started to feel things again, started to remember what joy felt like. Noelle reached across the table and took his hand. You're a good father, Garrett. Anyone can see that. I'm trying to be. It's the most important thing I'll ever do. Then it was Noelle's turn. She told him about her string of failed relationships, about the men who'd been emotionally unavailable, or still hung up on exes, or simply not interested in anything serious. She told him about Bradley and the humiliation of Christmas Eve, though now, with distance, it felt less devastating. I was starting to think I was the problem, that maybe I was asking for too much, or expecting things that don't exist. You're not the problem, Garrett said firmly. Trust me on that. Those men were idiots who couldn't recognize what was right in front of them. That's a kind thing to say. It's a true thing to say. They stayed at that cafe for 4 hours until the barista started giving them pointed looks about closing up. When they finally left, walking to their cars in the dimming afternoon light, Garrett turned to Noelle. Can I see you again? Soon? Yes, please. Their second date was dinner at a Thai restaurant Noelle loved. Their third was a Saturday afternoon at the park with Clemmy, who spent 2 hours on the swings and declared it the best day ever, even better than my birthday. Garrett was cautious. Noelle could sense it. He was protecting Clemmy, making sure this was real before fully integrating Noelle into their lives. She appreciated that about him. It showed he was thoughtful, careful with his daughter's heart. But slowly, over the weeks and months that followed, something beautiful began to build. In March, they took Clemmy to the zoo. It was a perfect spring day, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of blooming flowers. Clemmy ran from exhibit to exhibit with boundless energy, narrating everything she saw. "Look, Daddy, that monkey is eating a banana exactly like how you eat bananas. He's not peeling it all the way first either." Garrett looked at Noelle. "I'm being judged by my own daughter and a monkey? This is a new low." Noelle laughed. "For what it's worth, I also don't peel my bananas all the way first." "Thank you. Finally, someone understands me." At the penguin exhibit, Clemmy pressed her face against the glass, watching two penguins waddle side by side across the rocks. "Look, they're holding flippers, just like you and Miss Noelle hold hands." Garrett glanced down, suddenly aware that he and Noelle were, in fact, holding hands. They'd done it without thinking, their fingers interlacing naturally as they walked. "She's right," Noelle said, her voice soft. "We are like the penguins. Penguins mate for life, you know. Not that I'm saying, I didn't mean to imply. That came out wrong." Noelle squeezed his hand, smiling. "I know what you meant. And for the record, I like penguins." Something settled into place between them in that moment. Something solid and sure. In May, Clemmy had her kindergarten spring recital. She was playing a flower in a production about the changing seasons, specifically a tulip, which she informed everyone was the most important flower because it comes first in spring. Noelle sat next to Garrett's mother, Helen, a petite woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Helen had been polite but reserved the few times they'd met, and Noelle had sensed she was being evaluated. "So," Helen said as they waited for the performance to start, "Garrett tells me you're a teacher." "Yes, ma'am. Kindergarten at Riverside Elementary." "Good school. Clemmy will go there in the fall." "I know. Garrett mentioned it. I'm not sure if she'll be in my class. It depends on the assignments, but I'll keep an eye out for her either way." Helen studied her for a long moment. "My son has been through a lot, more than anyone should have to bear." "I know," Noelle said quietly. "Clemmy is his whole world. He'd do anything for her." "I know that too." Helen's expression softened slightly. "You seem like a good person, Noelle. Garrett doesn't trust easily anymore, but he trusts you. That means something." The lights dimmed before Noelle could respond, and the children filed onto the stage in their flower costumes. Clemmy, dressed as a bright red tulip, waved enthusiastically when she spotted them in the audience. After the performance, as they walked to the parking lot, Helen pulled Noelle aside. "She's a caper, Garrett," she called over her shoulder. "Don't mess this up." Garrett groaned. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Mom." But Noelle saw him smile. "Have you ever felt like you were exactly where you were supposed to be? Like all the wrong turns and disappointments were actually leading you somewhere right?" That's what Noelle felt when Garrett suggested a family trip to Virginia Beach in July.
"Family trip," he'd said casually, but the word had hung in the air between them. Family. Not, "We're bringing Clemmy along." Not, "It'll be the three of us." Family. Helen came too, claiming someone needed to make sure Garrett didn't let Clemmy eat nothing but ice cream for 3 days straight. But Noelle suspected Helen just wanted to watch them together to see if this thing between Garrett and Noelle was as real as it seemed. It was. Clemmy built sandcastles with an architectural precision that made Garrett beam with pride. "That's my girl. Strong foundation, good structural support." "Daddy, it's a sandcastle, not a building." "All castles are buildings, sweetheart, even sand ones." Noelle helped Clemmy collect shells, and they spent an afternoon sorting them by color and size, creating elaborate categories that only made sense to a 5-year-old. Helen watched from her beach chair, reading a mystery novel, but occasionally glancing up with an expression that looked almost like approval.
On their second evening, after Clemmy had fallen asleep in the hotel room and Helen had volunteered to stay with her, Garrett asked Noelle if she wanted to walk along the beach. The moon was full, hanging low over the water like a silver coin. The waves were gentle, rhythmic, soothing. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their shoes dangling from their hands, feet sinking into cool, wet sand. "I need to tell you something," Garrett said finally. Noelle stopped walking. "You don't have to if you're not ready." "I want to," he said. "You deserve to know, and I need to say it out loud, to you." "What?" Noelle asked softly. "That you were supposed to be part of our lives, that we needed you." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not trying to replace Marissa. I could never do that, and I wouldn't want to. She'll always be Clemmy's mother. But I think there's room in our lives for more love, for you, if you want that." Noelle felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I want that. So much. It won't always be easy. Clemmy has nightmares sometimes. She asks about her mom. I'm still figuring out how to be both parents, and I'm terrified of screwing this up, of letting her down, of letting you down."
"You won't," Noelle said. "And even if you did, we'd figure it out together. That's what people do when they love each other." The words hung in the air between them, and Noelle realized what she'd just said. She'd said love, out loud. She waited for panic to set in, but it didn't come, because it was true. "You love me?" Garrett asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I love you, both of you. I didn't expect it to happen this fast, but it did, and I'm not sorry." Garrett pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. "I love you too, Noelle. Jez, I love you too." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms while the waves rolled in and the moon watched overhead. And Noelle felt the last piece of her broken heart click back into place. In August, Clemmy turned 6. Her party was held at the local park, complete with a bouncy castle, a face painter, and more cupcakes than any group of children could reasonably consume. Noelle had helped Garrett plan everything, and watching him stress over whether they'd ordered enough juice boxes had been both endearing and hilarious. "It's a birthday party, not a military operation," she'd teased. "Tell that to 6-year-olds when they run out of juice." The party was a chaotic success. Clemmy ran around with her friends, her face painted like a butterfly, her laughter carrying across the park. Helen managed the gift table with the efficiency of a seasoned general, and Garrett spent most of the afternoon making sure no child fell out of the bouncy castle. As the party wound down and parents started collecting their exhausted children, Clemmy found Noelle sitting at one of the picnic tables. "Did you have fun?" Noelle asked, pulling Clemmy onto her lap. "The best fun ever. This was the best birthday ever." "I'm so glad, sweetie."
Clemmy was quiet for a moment, playing with Noelle's hair. Then she looked up, her hazel eyes serious. "Miss Noelle, can I ask you something?" "Of course, anything." "Are you going to come to all my birthday parties? Like every single one?" Noelle's heart stuttered. I'd like that very much, if you want me to." "I do want you to. I want you to come to all of them, forever and ever." Clemmy paused, her little face scrunching up in concentration. "I want you to be my family, like how Grandma Helen is my family. Can you be my family too?" Noelle felt tears building. "Oh, Clemmy." "Because I love you," Clemmy continued, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "And Daddy loves you too. I can tell. And you love us too, right?" "So much," Noelle managed to say. "I love you so, so much." "Then you should be my family. That's how it works." Clemmy wrapped her arms around Noelle's neck. Can you be mine?" Noelle looked over Clemmy's shoulder and saw Garrett watching them from across the park. Their eyes met, and even from a distance she could see the emotion on his face. "Yes," Noelle whispered into Clemmy's hair. "I can be yours. I want to be yours." "Good." Clemmy said, satisfied. That's settled then. Later that night, after Clemmy had crashed from sugar overload and Helen had gone home, Garrett told Noelle what Clemmy had said to him earlier. She asked me if you could be her family, he said, pulling Noelle close on the couch. She wanted to know if that was allowed, if it was okay for her to love you like that. What did you tell her? I told her it was more than okay. I told her it was wonderful. He kissed Noelle's forehead. She sees what I see, that you're special, that you're meant to be with us. I see it too. I've seen it since that night at Bellini's, when a brave little girl walked up to a stranger and asked if she was okay. She's always been braver than me. Maybe, but you're pretty brave too, Garrett. Letting yourself love again after everything you've been through? That takes real courage. You make it easy, he said simply. You make everything easy. It was October when Garrett made the decision. 10 months had passed since that Christmas Eve, and his life looked completely different now. Noelle was part of their daily routine. She came over for dinner several nights a week, joined them for weekend outings, texted him throughout the day with funny stories from her classroom. Clemmy had started calling her Ms. Noelle less and just Noelle more. And sometimes, when she was tired, she'd slip and call her Mummy, then quickly correct herself with an embarrassed giggle. Garrett knew what he wanted. He'd known for months, honestly, but he'd been cautious, wanting to be sure, wanting to do this right. He called the restaurant and made a reservation. Table 7, the same table where Noelle had been sitting alone, where Clemmy had approached her, where everything had started. The manager remembered them. Of course, Mr. Finnegan. I'll make sure it's ready. On the night of their reservation, Garrett dropped Clemmy off at Helen's house. His daughter was vibrating with barely contained excitement. You're going to ask her tonight, right, Daddy? You're going to ask her to be my family forever? That's the plan, sweetheart. And she's going to say yes, right? She has to say yes. I hope so, Garrett said honestly. I really, really hope so. Clemmy threw her arms around him. She will. I know she will, because she loves us. I can tell. Noelle arrived at Bellini's wearing the same emerald green dress she'd worn that Christmas Eve. She'd chosen it deliberately, wanting to honor where they'd started. Garrett was waiting for her at table 7, and when he saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her heart skip. You remembered, he said as she sat down. How could I forget? This is where it all began. She looked around the restaurant, which was decorated for autumn now instead of Christmas, but still warm and inviting. It feels like a lifetime ago. And also like yesterday, Garrett said. Isn't that strange, how time can feel like both? They ordered wine and the breadsticks Clemmy loved, and for a while they just talked. Noelle told him about a little boy in her class who'd announced he was going to marry his pet hamster, and Garrett told her about a difficult client who kept changing his mind about building designs. But there was an energy humming beneath the surface, a nervous anticipation that Noelle couldn't quite place. Finally, after their entrees had been cleared, Garrett reached across the table and took her hand. Noelle? He said, his voice serious. Do you remember this place? She smiled. Of course, this is where we met. This is where you were sitting, alone and heartbroken, because some idiot didn't see what was right in front of him. This is where my daughter, who is braver than I'll ever be, walked up to you and asked if you were okay. This is where everything changed. Noelle's heart was starting to race. Garrett? These past 10 months have been, I don't even have the words. You've been so patient with me, so understanding about everything, about Marissa, about my fears, about taking things slow. You've never tried to replace what I lost. You've just added to it, made it bigger, made it better. Tears were building in Noelle's eyes now, and she could see Garrett was fighting his own emotions. I love you, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. Clemmy loves you. She actually asked me if you could be hers, and I don't want to imagine my life without you in it. I spent 3 years thinking I'd never feel this way again, and then you were here, sitting at this table, and Clemmy was braver than I've ever been. He stood up, and for a moment I thought he was going to, but no, he wasn't kneeling, he wasn't proposing, not yet. He was just standing, pulling her gently to her feet, holding both her hands in his. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said. and Noelle's heart did a complicated flip between disappointment and relief. Not tonight, because I want to do this right, and I want Clemmy to be part of it when that time comes. But I am asking you, will you be part of our family? Will you let us be part of yours? Will you take this chance with us? Yes, Noelle said, not even having to think about it. Yes, Garrett, to all of it. Yes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was something precious, something he'd been searching for without knowing it. And Noelle felt the last lingering doubt, the last shadow of that terrible Christmas Eve, finally dissolve. She had come to this restaurant broken and alone, and now she was whole. Garrett called Clemmy the moment they left the restaurant. Helen answered, sounding amused. "She's been sitting by the phone for the past hour. I'll put her on." There was a rustling sound, and then Clemmy's voice exploded through the speaker. "Daddy, did you ask her? Did you ask her? What did she say?" "She said yes," Garrett said, unable to keep the joy out of his voice. "Noelle is going to be part of our family." The squeal that followed was so loud that both Garrett and Noelle had to hold the phone away from their ears. In the background, they could hear Helen laughing. "I knew it!" Clemmy shouted. "I knew she would say yes. I knew it the very first second I saw her. Daddy, I'm so happy. This is the best day ever. Even better than my birthday. Even better than when I got my purple bicycle."
"I'm pretty happy too, sweetheart," Garrett said, looking at Noelle, who was crying and laughing at the same time. "Can we have pancakes tomorrow to celebrate? With chocolate chips? And can Noelle come? Please, please, please?" "Yes, to all of the above," Garrett said. "She'll be there." "Best day ever," Clemmy repeated. Then more quietly, "Daddy, can I talk to Noelle?" Garrett handed the phone over and Noelle pressed it to her ear. "Hi, Clemmy." "Hi, Noelle. I just wanted to say I'm really glad my daddy found you, or that I found you, or that we all found each other. And I'm really glad you're going to be my family now, forever and ever." Noelle had to wipe her eyes. "I'm glad too, sweetie. So glad. Okay, I'm gonna go now because Grandma Helen says I need to calm down before bedtime. But I love you, okay? I love you so much." "I love you too, Clemmy. See you tomorrow for celebration pancakes." After they hung up, Garrett and Noelle stood in the parking lot of Bellini's, holding each other under the October stars. The same restaurant where they'd met. The same place where Noelle's worst Christmas Eve had turned into the beginning of something beautiful. "Thank you," Garrett said quietly, "for taking a chance on us, on me, on a single dad with a chaotic 5-year-old and a lot of baggage. She's 6 now," Noelle corrected gently, "and she's not chaotic. She's perfect. You both are. We're a package deal, you know. Me and Clemmy, you can't have one without the other. I wouldn't want to. I want both of you. All of you. The good days and the hard days. The pancakes and the nightmares. All of it." Garrett kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Noelle knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That night, as Noelle drove home, she thought about how much can change in 10 months. 10 months ago, she'd been sitting in Bellini's, abandoned and humiliated, wondering if something was fundamentally wrong with her. 10 months ago, she'd been convinced she was meant to be alone.
And now she had Garrett, who looked at her like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known how to ask. Now she had Clemmy, who had walked into her life with fearless compassion and claimed her as family. Now she had Helen, who'd given her the ultimate seal of approval with a gruff, "Don't mess this up." Now she had a family. The next morning, Noelle showed up at Garrett's house at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying fresh strawberries and whipped cream for the pancakes. Clemmy answered the door, still in her pajamas, and threw herself at Noelle with such force they both almost toppled over. "You came! You came! I knew you would come." "Of course I came," Noelle said, hugging her tightly. "I promised celebration pancakes, didn't I?" In the kitchen, Garrett was already mixing batter, and Helen was setting the table with a precision that suggested she'd been in the military in another life. When they saw Noelle, both of them smiled. "Welcome to the family," Helen said simply. And that was that. They made pancakes together. Clemmy insisted on helping, which meant there was batter on every surface and chocolate chips scattered across the floor. But no one cared. They were too busy laughing, too busy being together,
too busy celebrating the beautiful, unexpected way their lives had woven together. As they sat around a table, eating pancakes drowning in syrup and strawberries, Clemmy raised her glass of orange juice. "I want to make a toast," she announced solemnly, "to family, and to Noel, who is the best family ever, and to Daddy for finally being brave, and to me for walking over to her table that night, even though Daddy said I had no boundaries." "I stand by that statement," but he was smiling. "To family," they all echoed, clinking their glasses together.
And as Noel looked around the table, at Garrett with his kind eyes and his terrible hair-braiding skills, at Clemmy with her wild blonde curls and her fearless heart, at Helen with her gruff warmth and her quiet approval, she realized something profound. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives are actually doorways to something better, something we never could have imagined. Sometimes we have to sit alone at a restaurant table, heartbroken and humiliated, before we can be found by the people who will change everything. Sometimes it takes a 5-year-old girl to see what adults miss, that lonely people should never be lonely alone, that kindness costs nothing but means everything, that family isn't always about blood, but about who shows up. Noel had shown up to Bellini's expecting nothing and found everything, and now, sitting in this kitchen, eating chocolate chip pancakes with syrup dripping everywhere and love filling every corner of the room, she understood that the best stories don't always start the way we expect them to. Sometimes they start with rejection. Sometimes they start with tears, and sometimes they start with a little girl walking across a restaurant and asking the bravest question in the world, "Can we join you?" And sometimes, just sometimes, the answer changes everything. That Christmas Eve, Noel had learned something she'd carry with her forever. The darkest moments often come right before the light breaks through. Bradley's cruelty had felt like an ending, but it was actually a beginning. Because if he hadn't left, she wouldn't have been sitting alone at that table. And if she hadn't been sitting alone, Clemmy never would have approached her. And if Clemmy hadn't approached her, none of this would have happened.
Every disappointment, every heartbreak, every moment she'd thought something was wrong with her, all of it had been leading here. To Garrett, to Clemmy, to this family. Garrett had learned something too. He'd learned that loving again didn't mean betraying what came before, that opening his heart to Noel didn't diminish what he'd shared with Marissa, that grief and joy could coexist, that he could honor his past while building his future. And Clemmy had simply known what the adults had been scared to see, that love doesn't have limits, that family grows when you let it, that sometimes all it takes is the courage to ask a stranger if they're okay. One question, one moment of bravery, 3 lives forever changed. So maybe the lesson here is this: pay attention to the little moments, the small acts of kindness, the children who see with clearer eyes than adults, the invitations to connect, even when you're hurting, even when you're scared. Because you never know when a little girl in a red velvet dress is going to walk up to your table and change your entire world. You never know when your worst Christmas Eve is going to become the beginning of your best story. And you never know when a simple question, "Can we join you?" is going to be the answer to everything you've been searching for. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that hope exists even in dark moments, if it made you believe in unexpected beginnings, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to hear more stories about the beautiful, messy, miraculous ways people find each other. And remember, you are never as alone as you feel. Sometimes family is just waiting for you to be brave enough to say yes.